Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another AutoCentral week, proudly hosted and put together by Auto Trader and myself, your host, George Mini, and I'm joined by none other than the usual Wandi Sishi. How's it, Wandi?
Oh, not too bad, George. And I know today we have something special for all the Bucky lovers out there.
We do indeed. And as Wandi alluded to, ladies and gentlemen, today we will be speaking to Neale from Ford. Why? Because the 2020 Auto Trader Industry Report has revealed that the Ford Ranger is South Africa's most sold used car. We find out why in a second. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but we are joined by none other than the Managing Director of Ford South Africa, Neale Hill. Did I pronounce that correctly, Neale?
Spot on, George, and good to meet yourself and Wandi, and thank you very much for having us on the show. Yep. Position that I hold is MD or Managing Director of Ford Motor Company of Southern Africa, and I must say it's one of the really great roles that I've had in my career. So fantastic to be in South Africa running the operation here.
Lovely stuff, Neale. I mean, sounds like you've got a South African accent. You're from South Africa, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I spent 10 years working overseas, so I left, sort of 2006 to go and do a 3-year stint in Thailand. Somebody forgot to tell everybody that it was going to be 3 years only, and I ended up spending 10 years out.
Wow.
So I lived in Thailand for 3.5 years, China, in Shanghai for 2, Auckland for 2 years in New Zealand, and then I finished up with a 2.5 year stint in Melbourne. Before returning back to South Africa at the beginning of 2016. So you might hear the odd little Aussie or Kiwi twang in the accent, but very, very proudly South African. And, South Africa's always been home for me. And it's just great to be able to come back and be a part of this incredible automotive industry that we have in South Africa.
We do indeed. And, I was going to ask you, do you think you picked up a little bit of the Aussie twang? I can't quite hear it, but they tell me that outside of South Africa, we sound like Aussies. I just don't see it. Yeah,
there's the odd word or two that comes through, but I've been back since the beginning of 2016. So I think it's slowly but surely working its way out. Which is not a bad thing.
Yeah, not a bad thing at all. So,
how's the popularity of Fords in the other places you've lived?
Really good question, Wandi. And I think that when you look at it in terms of so let's go with my most recent country, Australia. Their Ranger is the number one selling pickup. I mean, we outsell Toyota Hilux both in the double cab. 4x4 market. So, that's something that we're very proud of there. Ford's had a very long heritage in Australia, but very similar to South Africa. South Africa, we've been here for 96 years as a manufacturer. But Ford is a very popular product. And also in New Zealand, we market leaders in terms of pickup sales. So very strong heritage there. And that's where Ranger, really does exceptionally well for us. Thailand, challenging market. You've got very strong players there of Toyota and Isuzu. So we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. And then, of course, China is just an absolutely massive market. I mean, there's brands there that we haven't even heard of. But, we're running at about, last time I checked in terms of China, we were definitely tracking above the 2% market share in a market that's probably in the order of about 18 to 20 million vehicles a year. So It's a substantial market and very, very very complex. So yeah, it was a phenomenal experience, but Ford is very popular, wherever I've traveled.
Well, that is very true for South Africa as well. And, first question from me, Neale, is did you have any idea that the Ford Ranger, particularly in the used car market, was as popular as it is? And why do you think South Africa's gravitated towards it? Because you alluded just now to to the fact that it's beaten the Toyota Hilux, and that's what we found as well. The Toyota Hilux has been up there in the top 10, but now so is the Ford Ranger. Do you, first of all, did you know that it was so popular amongst used car buyers? And secondly, why do you think that is?
Well, George, I think to a large extent we did expect that Ranger was doing very well and was a very popular vehicle. But I think, to get the endorsement, like we do in terms of the popularity of the Ranger in the used market, I think is something that, we were pleasantly surprised by, I think is the best way I could put it, because, we knew it was popular, but not as popular as that. And I think, it's something that we do pay a lot of attention to is, a vehicle has a longevity built into it. And it's one of the things that we always look at is, the residual value or the value of the vehicle in the used market and its popularity is very important in terms of total cost of ownership. And, if it sells well first time around and it sells well the second time around, we know that customers have that confidence that they can buy it and they can get a good return on their investment. And, I think that's also part of what gives people confidence. And, so we look at this comprehensively in terms of the total cost of ownership or the value to customers. And a big piece of it is, the servicing cost of the vehicle, the reliability of the vehicle, but then also, how much are you going to get as a return, or what's your percentage of the original purchase price that a customer gets back? And that's something that we have focused on, and we've got a lot more work to do in that particular area. Because that helps build customers' confidence in the product.
Well, I suppose, in the long run, in order to get out of a car, to get into a new one, you have to be able to sell that car on the second-hand market for a decent amount of money, so that you're not behind on the finance. Because what we find in South Africa, and, I don't know if you can comment from a Ford perspective, but what we find in South Africa is that often consumers have to wait at least more than 3 years in order to get themselves out of the finance deal, because the residual value of the car drops just way too quickly and then flattens off. So I suppose if Ford can keep those second-hand car prices, or they remain high as a result of demand, let's rather talk to the economic model. If they can remain high as a result of demand, or higher than usual, then that means it's more place for you to sell the outgoing customer from the used car into new.
George, 100%. And I think, you've touched on something that, something that we pay a lot of attention to is, that whole debt equity kind of comparison when you look at it in terms of a customer's decisions when it comes to financing a vehicle. And we've seen some worrying trends in terms of extending the overall finance packages on vehicles and elements like that. And I think the thing that people don't necessarily realize up front is that your first period of time, normally 2 to 3 years, and I don't know the exact numbers, and the finance experts will be able to tell me, but you're actually funding the interest. You're not really paying off the capital amount. And what happens is that when it gets to the point that people start deciding that it's time to buy a new vehicle, and traditionally we've seen that we used to be at the sort of 37, 38 month period, that has now started moving out, and it's moving more to the 42, 43 month period when I last checked the stats. But what you end up finding is that the customers are still sitting in a position where they're not necessarily in positive equity, meaning that they haven't paid off the capital amount and they've been servicing interest.
Yeah.
And then they get themselves into the cycle in terms of saying, well, the used value of the vehicle, or the trade-in price, or the sale price of the vehicle is still not enough to offset the remaining portion of the debt that they pay.
Yeah.
And that's when we get into a vicious circle where then people start over-relying on the trade-ins, and we start seeing things happening. And it's really worrying, especially, given what's happened in the economy with COVID-19 coming along, and the pressure that everybody's feeling, also the exchange rate, unfortunately, going where it has. It's going to put a lot of pressure on prices and inflation across all sectors of economy. So that's something that we're watching very, very carefully. And we've been working, with Ford Credit very carefully about how we can do different finance options and different packages to try and help customers buy cars, on a 2 to 3 year cycle or 3 to 4 year cycle, but also not get into the point where they're actually locked into that vehicle because they still owe such a massive amount on the trade-in value of the vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose.
So trade-in prices play a huge role, and that's a big piece to offsetting or being able to put down a deposit on the next car.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
I just wanted to add to that. That's actually one of the key findings that we found when we're doing the reports, is that for the used car buyer, you get a lot more value when you want to buy the Ranger versus some of its competitors. And I think that's what's aided so much to its popularity, is that for someone who is maybe financially strained, but they want a top quality Bucky, for instance, that's going to be an all-rounder. Ranger is kind of, where they're going to go from a price point of view.
Yep. I think also, Wandile, you picked up on a great point there as well, is I think just the versatility of the product as well. And I think that that's something that we've seen in South Africa is that, you look at our lifestyle, we love to be in the outdoors. Vehicles are an enabler to life. And I think that, we've recently just launched a whole communication platform around Ranger, which is called Live the Ranger Life. And, it's an enabler. It allows you to get out there and do the stuff that we enjoy doing. It's being outdoors. It's living the kind of lifestyle that we're doing, helping others. And I think that that's the practicality is, we traditionally, if you go back many years ago, your sort of medium-sized vehicles, and I go back to your Ford Sapphires and your Sierras and your Toyota Cressiders and Camrys, and George is smiling because it goes back a good number of years. But that was the traditional car that everybody drove. And what we've seen over the years is how it's been now started shifting into buckies. And, that's where Ranger and Hiluxes and Isuzus are playing such a fantastic role because of their practicality, their versatility of being able to transport a family in safety and luxury, but the practicalities of being able to lug things around and tow loads. So, it's just a great all-round versatile vehicle that we have in South Africa that we really love.
Well, I mean, I suppose that's the reason the top three sold vehicles in terms of Ford Rangers are double cabs, because people want that versatility. You want a bit of a load bed and something to cart stuff around on in the week, and take the family surfing on the weekend. So you don't have to have two kinds of vehicles. That's what the Ford Ranger really does. Do you find that?
100%. I mean, we when we look at the usage and we talk to our customers, I mean, that's exactly what it's doing. Is it's the, I remember years ago, it used to be you had a car that go to church and you had a car to work. And now what's happened is that the double cab has become that utilitarian vehicle that does both. I mean, it's just that perfect all-rounder. And I think that that's also really helped the Ranger appeal is that, when we launched this particular iteration back in 2013, 2014, it was a big step up from our previous model. The previous generation Ranger had been around for about 10 or 11 years. And, when you come to an all new model, you're really looking for something that's a game changer. And, we found that the Ford heritage of building trucks, I mean, we've been building F-150s and been the top seller of F-150s in the US for over 40 years. And the ability to be able to take that experience and that knowledge from a company that has such a history steeped in utility and pickups, and bring it across and bring those learnings into Ranger really set us up very well. And we've continued to refine and add things into Ranger that has just continued to. So even though it's now, well into its life cycle, it's moving up into 7-8 years old in its life cycle, we keep advancing the technology, the driver comforts and the luxurious nature of what the vehicle is without moving away from its built for tough credentials, which really makes it cornerstone vehicle in our lineup.
Well, I suppose that goes to, don't try and fix what's not broken. Just improve on it. So it sounds like Ford is really improving on a proven base, and we're seeing in the data that this Ford Ranger is doing wonderful things. I mean, it's moved up the ranks just in the last month. In the top 10 vehicles searched for, it's moved up one place. So it sounds like Ford is looking at a lot of data to inform what you as an OEM are doing. And what is your viewpoint? Now that the pandemic has forced us to try and future-proof our businesses, what has changed at Ford since the pandemic, and what have you learnt, and how are you adapting to this change?
I think the question is, what haven't we learned? I mean, the learning curve has been phenomenal. When you look at how quickly the pandemic, moved and how it forced decisions and it just, there was so much that happened in such a short space of time. We were very fortunate in the sense that being a global company, we were able to look at what was happening in other organizations within the Ford world around and try and pick up early signals and indications. And we saw what happened in China going, literally very early on in the year, moving into a lockdown and seeing what's happened there and looking at everything that transpired there. What we saw is even in the lockdown situation, customers were still searching for vehicles. They were still going and looking for information. Now, what they couldn't do is they couldn't go and do it physically. So the days of going into a dealership and asking for brochures and test drives and elements like that, dropped off. But what we saw was a massive increase in terms of people moving into online platforms. And, now all of a sudden, car review sites, information sites that were providing more detail on vehicles became more important. And the quality of time and the length of time that people were spending on those review sites went up. So people were looking for information. They were still engaged actively on vehicles. But then we started seeing that the online engagement started changing dramatically. And as a consequence of that, and I'm sure we're not the only ones who've done this, but you start looking at how you're serving up material digitally, how you're interacting with people in an online environment, and looking at all the different tools and pieces of the puzzle that can help you actually become a lot more effective at communicating with customers, and also understanding that your customer who interacts on a digital platform is very different has different expectations to a customer operating on, in the normal traditional platform. So it's much more about, well, I've sent you an email and I'm expecting a response. And that response is timed in seconds as in hours. So, that's really forced us to look at it. And we've looked at our digital capability, both at the Ford Motor Company level, but at a dealer level as well. And we've started serving things very differently in terms of, 360-degree walkarounds, presentation of vehicles. We recently launched an Ask Ford facility on our websites, that if you're engaging on the ford.co.za website, and you've got a question, you go into the Ask Ford function, it's actually got intuitive learning, that it starts scrolling through the web and also all of our archives and presents you with an offer that most fits your requirements. And we're seeing accuracy over the 90% already. Wow. And this has been up and running and been served to customers, for the last 30 days. So it's that kind of evolution that we're going to see happening, and it's going to happen faster, and it's going to continue to grow.
It's so good to see Ford on that bandwagon, and using data and algorithms and the internet to your advantage. Wandi, what was the monthly search increase pre-lockdown versus post-lockdown, or not post-lockdown because we're not freaking post-lockdown yet. We're still in lockdown. What am I talking about? What has the increase in the Ford range been pre-lockdown and during lockdown in terms of growth?
So, the Ford range is, like I said, it's so uniquely positioned in terms of, like you said, Neale, it gives all the luxury that you want, and also gives you the price points that people are looking for. So when we looked at pre-lockdown monthly range of searches, we've seen that during lockdown alone, they're growing by around 27%.
Wow.
Which is insane. It may be one of the fastest growing vehicles, not even in the double cab or single cab buckets, but generally
full stop
as a whole, being buckies in general grow, and Ford Ranger looks like to be at the forefront of that growth, specifically in the used car space.
What do you think is attributes? Why do you think the Ford Ranger is growing like that, Neale? I mean, besides just being a double cab, because if it was just being a double cab, we would see all double cabs growing at this kind of pace. But Ford Ranger seems to be beating other double cabs. What do you think you put it down to in this vehicle?
A really good question. I think you reflect on that, and I think I think the vehicle meets the requirements that the customers are looking for, and I think that is a starting point in terms of what customers are looking for. It's got to provide the right answers. It's got to meet those requirements. I think that one of the things that we've also really put a lot of time and effort into is both through ourselves and through our dealers is really working on the quality, the reliability of the vehicles, the coverage and the service support that we provide. And, it's never done. It's never something that you can ever sit back and say, we're there. It's an ongoing quest. And I think that that's something that we've really been working incredibly hard with our dealers. And trust me, we've got a long way to go in terms of getting it to a point. But it's a partnership that we have with our dealers. And it's really about having a level of consumer centricity that says that we're going to get on top of it and we're going to make sure that we're providing the service. I think that that's also that reassurance. We have 144 dealers around the country that, are there to look after our vehicles that are on the road. And we, to me, it's a case of we're really looking at this on the basis of providing support for, new and used vehicles. And I think also when you start getting into a situation that there is some scarcity in terms of vehicles that are available in the used car market, it also does start creating a little bit of momentum. And then I think that, we've continued to refine range, as I said, over the years, and we've continued to build the brand presence. And, I think that familiarity and that comfort that range is around is something that does provide confidence. It does, give people who are looking at buying a secondhand vehicle that confidence that range is part of the fabric of South Africa, of the Ford network, of the Ford brand, and is here to stay. And I'm very pleased to say that Ranger is going to be here to stay. We recently announced our investment in the special economic zone together with the government in terms of building supply park or industrial park right next door to the factory in Silverton to move and to ensure the future longevity of Ranger production in South Africa, and the fact that we're going to carry on exporting to 144 countries around the world. So Range is a success here, and it's a success in overseas markets as well.
Well, I mean, you speak my language, Neale, because my ultimate belief is that brands aren't built based on a good product alone. You have to have a product. There's a certain benchmark that you have to reach with a product that kind of gives it the right to compete. But it seems to me like Ford is taking the branding seriously from a customer service point of view, because I suppose therein lies the trick. Not the trick, because I don't think it's an easy trick. Therein lies the sweetener for the consumer. If there's a really good experience with not only the product but with the service and with the dealership, how they're treated, the resale value that we were talking about earlier on, all of that, I suppose, are feeders into the popularity of this Ford Ranger. And so you're getting a whole bunch of things right, not only the product. And it seems to me like you're doing a damn good job of that, because 27% growth is phenomenal for this Ford Ranger double cab. Let's get into those new projects that you alluded to a second ago, Neale. The upgrades to the Pretoria manufacturing plant, that's creating jobs in South Africa. Tell us a little bit about that. What is Ford doing?
So what we've, first of all, I mean, we've looked at it as a situation to try and streamline our production processes and make it as efficient as we possibly can. And this is something that we've been working on for a number of years with government. And I must say the support that we've gotten across all three spheres of the government have been phenomenal. So this is a project that is both at a national level, at a provincial level with the Gauteng provincial government, but also from the city of Tshwane as well. So without the three of them, we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we've achieved. And, we had this vision of, instead of having parts brought, from far and wide and arriving at Silverton, which is where our manufacturing operation is how could we create a home base that cut down the logistics and the infrastructure to put more efficiency into it, but also allowed us to have our suppliers working right next door to us so that we could continuously be assessing quality, the flow of parts. And if we picked up something that we were concerned about, we could go straight into that supplier and start working with them and saying, hey, listen, we've looked at this, we've looked at that, we need to make some tweaks and adjustments. So it's about that continuous refining of the process and making sure that we've got this continuous loop of quality that's going into it, because it's really, this is where the sum of all the parts is greater than the whole. And if you've got great quality parts going into your vehicles that are fresh out of those factories coming onto our production line, we believe we're going to build a better vehicle and we're going to be able to meet our customers' requirements. So that was a key element of it. We also then, of course, have the added advantage that we're going to create jobs for people in the Silverton, the Mamelodi, Nelmapius, Esterist area, which, is sorely needed in South Africa. So this is also part of Ford giving back to our communities and really putting our roots down deep in the Pretoria area and creating Tshwane as an automotive hub. And of course, we've got our fellow manufacturers of BMW and Nissan in Roslyn. So, it's our part of growing the economy and really making the automotive industry in South Africa one of the key manufacturing cornerstones. added to that is we've got our engine plant down in Port Elizabeth where we build, engines, and that's, upwards of 250,000 engines a year that we're building, and currently 2 different powertrains. We build the 2.2 and 3.2 family, plus also the 2-liter single and bi-turbo engines, which go into Ranger and Everest, that we produce locally. We export components and fully built up engines as well. So it's really about growing that footprint and looking at this on the basis of how can we make a meaningful difference in the economy of South Africa. And I think, once again, one's got to give recognition to the government in terms of understanding the fact that you need a public-private partnership. I mentioned that I was in Australia. My job in Australia was actually helping to transform the organization there after the announcement of the closure of manufacturing in Australia. So they don't have an automotive manufacturing industry at all. Everything in Australia is now fully imported.
Wow.
And, it's critical that we can't lose what we have here in the automotive industry. And that's why it's so crucial that as an industry, we continue to work very closely with government. And it's about creating an opportunity for the industry to grow in South Africa, because it's going to make a huge difference in terms of economic stimulus, the activity that we have in the country. So, it's a long-term vision that we have, that we are part of the automotive industry. As I said, we've been here for 96 years. We plan to be here for another 96 at least. And we're going to evolve with the industry as it evolves.
Well, I think, that's the difference, right? So I think Ford was one of the first OEMs to really identify that, saving costs wasn't necessarily the most important thing during the switchover or when lockdown started, but their livelihoods and the economic stability of the country. And I think a lot of OEMs have kind of taken what Ford has done and try to apply it wherever they can, and starting to realize that saving lives and people's livelihoods is a lot more important in the long term. In fact, actually age your long-term profit margin. So, everyone sees it.
Yeah, 100%, Wandi. And I think, it's something that at Ford we're very proud of, is our entrepreneur, our philanthropic spirit, I should rather say, because, and this comes from Bill Ford himself, who's our global chairman, and, great grandson of Henry Ford. And, he heads up the Ford Foundation, which does a lot of work in terms of the philanthropic area, giving back to communities. Every year, September is our Global Caring Month. So everybody is encouraged to go and donate of their time at community projects to give back to the communities, not only the communities which our workers, employees come from, but also communities around us. This year, we're doing it a little bit differently, of course, because of COVID, but, it's a global initiative, and we're incredibly proud of the hours that we've given to our communities in the past. And, we're going to continue to find ways to make a difference to people in the local communities in the country as a whole, and be a part of it. We're by no means the only ones doing it. I mean, everybody has a role and responsibility to do. We do it the Ford way. And, it's great to be able to put our personal touch on it.
That's brilliant. So, creating jobs in Pretoria and for the country as a whole, hats off to Ford, because there aren't that many jobs to go around in South Africa today. And, a lot of people are cutting salaries, cutting jobs, and it's a sad state that we find ourselves in. So it's really good to come across a company that is bucking that trend, for lack of a better term. Focus back on brand, Neale. You've recently launched a brand campaign focused on your proud heritage, which I'm assuming is that 100-year history in South Africa. Tell us a bit about this brand campaign.
Yeah, the brand campaign is really just to talk about what Ford does for South Africa, and it's entitled Ford for South Africa. And what we wanted to do was just remind customers and create the connection of the fact that I think there's very few families in South Africa, or very few people in South Africa, that probably haven't been touched by the Ford brand in some way along the journey. And I think it's really important to pay homage to what's preceded us and the future that lies ahead of us, and to really create that reassurance that, we are such a fabric of South African life, and, we intend to be here for a long time to come. And, our role is about being a part of creating great vehicles. And when you go back and you have a look at some of the nostalgic models that we built, I mean, who can forget the the Capri Piranha V8, which was built by Basil Green, one of our motorsport and auto industry icons, recently inducted into the Hall of Fame. The Sierra XR8s that we built, that was, a very special model where we found a way to put a 5-liter V8 into an engine bay that never accommodated a 5-liter V8. And you then start playing it forward and you look at all the different products that we've built and the heritage that we have. And, it's just about celebrating that and taking it further into looking at all of the different elements. So, there's the Ford Wildlife Foundation, where we have, over 20 projects in South Africa that we support that are all into the conservation, research, and education related to our natural resources, and looking at that. It's about our sustainability efforts that we're looking at in terms of how do we reduce our footprint and elements like that. So the dealer network, in terms of the people that we have employed as part of the Ford family, and we regard them as our dealer partners, and they very much a part of that. So it was really about talking about what we've done, what we're doing, and what we're going to be doing. And it's really about, we see it as a campaign, but we actually see it as really a manifesto of who we are as a company and where we're going, and the contribution that we make and that we're going to carry on making. And there's a huge amount that we have plans on that we're working towards, and how we can help uplift the economy of the country and people like that. And just as an example, one of the great projects that we get involved with, and it's part of a global initiative, is the Enactus program, which is about students at the various colleges around the country that get to compete against each other. And ultimately, somebody goes off and competes on a global stage representing South Africa in the Enactus competition. But, it just exposes us to the wealth of talent and phenomenal people that we have in this country who are just passionate. And it reminds us of what we do and why we do it. So it's really about giving back to South Africa as well.
Well, there you have it. MD, or Managing Director of Ford Motor Company South Africa, and giving back to South Africa in many, many ways. There's not many things that you mentioned there, Neale, that I'm not familiar with. I remember the Ford Capri. My tennis coach had a Ford Capri, and he would wheel spin this thing in and out of the area that we used to go and to have tennis lessons in. The Ford XR8, the Sierra. I remember one of my friends' fathers driving this Ford XR8, and we were in awe of this XR8, and many other things that I agree with you. Ford has become and is a part of the fabric of South Africa. That unfortunately gets us to the end of our time together. I'm sure that Neale and Wandile could speak a whole lot more on all the good things that Ford is doing. Any final thoughts, Wandi?
Yeah, I think taking a page out of Neale and Ford's book. If you can do good, do good. And if you're looking for a car, search AutoTrader.
Exactly what Wandile wanted to say there was, if you're looking for a car, search AutoTrader. We're in the middle of lockdown, and we have to do this over video, and sometimes the internet connections go all awry. Any final thoughts, Neale, before we let you go on your way?
No, George, just appreciate the time with yourself and Wandile. I think it's been great to sit and have a chat about the vehicle. As you can hear, I'm passionate about the brand. I'm passionate about the business. The great thing about the XR8 is that, we've got a new version, still running a 5-liter V8. And of course, it's a Ford Mustang. And, there's exciting things that are happening there as well. So, you're starting to see electrification become part of the Ford stable as well. And, I think for us, the blend is keeping connected with our roots, having a really good V8 engine, but also then starting to embrace the new technology and battery electric. And, I think the future is bright. It's up to us to create the future. And, we plan to be very much a part of the fabric of South Africa going forward, and really appreciate the time to chat to both of you. So thanks very much.
You're most welcome. And thank you, Neale Hill, Managing Director of Ford Motor Company, and Wandile Sishe, and we will see you next time.